Greetings, Bookie fans! Michael here, and has there ever been a Pokemon that you thought looked really cool or awesome or cute, but then were disappointed to learn that it's not very good in battle? Well, that's what this video is. I will be covering 10 Pokemon that I quite like, but aren't as good in the competitive scene as I wish they were. Now I want to be clear, this video is 10 Pokemon I wish were better, not 10 Pokemon I wish were not bad. In other words, not all of these Pokemon will be completely god-awful, useless Pokemon. Some of them do have redeeming qualities and can find success in certain situations. I just really like the Pokemon, so wish they could find success in a lot of situations, because none of these Pokemon are seeing wide usage in the competitive scene in recent history. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel, tap that bell, you know the drill, and let's dive in with 10 Pokemon I wish were better. Starting with number 1, Castform. If you've been around my channel for a while, you saw this coming. I adore Castform because I think it's so incredibly cute, but it's not been dealt the kindest plate. The fandom, on average, hates it for allegedly having boobs or a butt or whatever. Emphasis on allegedly. It was also never given a sandstorm form, and until Pokemon Home came out like a month ago, its weather forms did not have shiny forms. Thankfully, Pokemon Home fixed that and they look amazing, especially the hail form. Can I get a hail yeah? Wow, I'm impressed so many of you said it, because that is what I am choosing to believe. But another area of injustice to Castform is its stats, which are so bad. Castform has base 70 in every single one of its stats, which is awful. Even stat spreads like this only work if each stat is good, like with Jirachi. But when they're as low as 70, it means Castform is below average at everything. It can't take hits well, it can't dish out hits well, and it's not going to be outspeeding enough Pokemon for it to be practical. Plus, its weather changing gimmick is fun, but it's not super useful in battle because the ability doesn't let it control the weather. You're never gonna use Castform as a weather setter when there are other Pokemon out there that can set the weather by just entering the battle because their ability does that. Castforms just causes it to change with the weather, which isn't useful enough. It's such a shame to me that such an adorable Pokemon that doesn't evolve further ends up being so freaking useless, so nobody cares about it besides me, it feels like. I hope it's in the Sword and Shield DLC and gets some kind of buff, like maybe an evolution or a Galarian form if we're lucky, but otherwise, Castform's gonna continue to really stink. The next Pokemon is number 2, Grapploct. Grapploct is my favorite Generation 8 Pokemon. I think its color scheme is badass and makes it look like a superhero, and then its color scheme for its shiny form is equally as incredible. I had a ton of fun using one on my team, and its pre-evolution Clobbopus is freaking adorable. These two are flat out fantastic. But while Grapploct has some strong points, it's not the most competitively effective Pokemon. Its base stats are a great example of a stat spread that causes many Pokemon to falter. It hits really hard, but it's too slow to outspeed opposing threats and doesn't have the great bulk necessary to take a lot of hits. Grapploct does have an incredible signature move, that being Octolock, which traps the target and drops its defense and special defense by 1 stage at the end of every turn. This can cripple stall-type Pokemon because dropping their defenses prevents them from living endless hits. But that kind of strategy works best on a Pokemon that is really tanky but doesn't have great offenses. So you trap the enemy Pokemon and then drop its defenses to make up for the tanky Pokemon's poor offenses. But it has the defenses to stick around for a while the defensive stats of the enemy drop. Grapploct doesn't have the bulk necessary to pull this off, plus it already hits hard from the start. Grapploct also doesn't have great abilities. Limber isn't that useful because who cares about preventing paralysis on an already slow Pokemon? As for Technician, it just doesn't get very many good moves to make use of it. Grapalots can absolutely be effective in certain gimmicky setups, like a Perish Trap team. It traps enemy Pokemon with Octolock and can maybe use Soak to turn ghost types into water types so we can use Octolock on them. But other than that, it's not that good of a Pokemon, which is a shame because I really wish it was a new meta threat of Generation 8. The next Pokemon is number 3, Vikavolt. As many of you know, I adore Vikavolt. Extremely positive experiences with my 2 Vikavolts named Havoc and Ion in Sun and Ultra Sun respectively catapulted it into being my second favorite Pokemon, nearly surpassing Sceptile for a while. I love its electric typing, and it really excels at being a cool bug without being scary or gross, like real life bugs are. Ugh. But Vikavolt has an extremely glaring problem in the stat department. It is slow. Like, really slow. Vikavolt's base speed stat is 43, which is lower than Grubbin's. What? How? Why? That doesn't make any sense. Its wings let it fly fast. The Pokedex literally talks about how it zips around and does acrobatic flying maneuvers. Really? Oh, it can? How is it capable of doing those things if it has a speed stat that is lower than a Caterpie? This low speed stat severely hurts Vikavolt in the battle department because it doesn't have the defenses necessary to make up for its poor speed. Yeah, it hits like a truck. But if it's outspeed and KO'd before it has the chance to hit like said truck, then who cares? Vikavolt has found some success in the Gen 8 VGC scene on Trick Room teams because its bad speed helps it under Trick Room. However, it's not often selected as a Trick Room sweeper because there are better, slower options like Rhyperior or Torkoal or Hatterene or Mudsdale. Those Pokemon are slower, and their stab max moves have better secondary effects than Max Lightning or Max Flutterby. If Vikavolt was made fast from the start, I'm reasonably confident it would have ended up as a pretty impressive threat. But since it's slower than a bag of rocks, it's just not as good as I wish it was. The next Pokemon is another one of my all-time favorite Pokemon that is also an electric type, that being number 4, Zebstrike. Zebras are my favorite animal and electric is my favorite type. Therefore, a badass zebra with lightning bolt stripes was an instant love of mine. I've talked in other recent videos about how I hope Zebstrike gets a Galarian form or new evolution, partially because I think this awesome Pokemon deserves some love, but also because it stinks in battle. Looking at its stats, it doesn't seem like it would be bad. It's very fast and has a pretty solid physical attack stat, so it seems like it would have success in a sweeper role. Additionally, all 3 of its abilities give it an immunity that boosts stats, which is pretty awesome. But then, you look at its moveset, and this poor zebra, it's got nothing. It's an electric type, but the only physical electric moves it learns are Spark, which is weak, and Wild Charge, which does recoil damage. Now this isn't entirely Zebstrike's fault, because how the game has been made just makes it really hard to succeed as a physical electric type if you're not given a signature move. All of the good physical electric type moves are signature moves. Plasma Fists, Aura Wheel, Fusion Bolt, Bolt Strike, Bolt Beak. They're all amazing, but only like 2 Pokemon get them. As for Zebstrike's physical coverage, it's okay. You've got like some fire moves, and then like low kick and bounce, which are pretty good if you Dynamax it, but other than that, it's not really enough to make up for its lack of good stab moves. I'm hoping in the DLC it gets Zing Zap, that would be pretty awesome, but I don't wanna get my hopes too high. I think I'd rather see it get a Galarian form or Galarian evolution or something like that, because that's really the only way I see its moveset expanding. I honestly just wish Zebstrike had been a special attacker from the start. It gets lots of good special moves, especially electric type special moves. If you just swapped its special attack and physical attack, it would be a much better Pokemon. The next Pokemon is number 5, Dreadnought. I liked Dreadnought from the moment it was revealed. It's a reptile, first off, and I like reptiles. and I think its overall design of being a cranky, rocky, snapping turtle is just fun. I really enjoyed using one on my playthrough team for Sword, and I also think its Gigantamax forms is one of my favorites. It also has an incredible shiny, hence why it was one of the first ones that I hunted. But unfortunately, Dreadnought has several things going against it in the battle department. First is its abilities. Its only good ability is Swift Swim. Strong Jaw doesn't boost any of its stab moves, and Shell Armor protecting from critical hits is just too situational. So because Swift Swim is its only good ability, Dreadnought's only really practical on rain teams, and weather teams just aren't as good as they used to be, thanks to all of the weather-changing max moves that exist now. Additionally, its typing of Water Rock is strictly inferior to Water Ground. It still has the 4x Grass weakness, but then has 3 others on top of that, including to Ground type, which it's supposed to be good against. Water Ground also has an immunity and only 1 less resistance, so it's strictly superior defensively. I wish that Dreadnought was not a Water Rock type, and I also wish that it wasn't dependent on rain to be effective. Next is number 6, Tropius. Apatosaurus, a type of long neck dinosaur like Tropius, has been my favorite dinosaur since I was 5 years old. Therefore, I instantly liked Tropius, since it's a good-looking, long-necked dinosaur made even cooler by its dope palm tree aesthetic and being able to freaking fly. I've talked about wanting Tropius to get a regional variant or some kind of evolution or a mega evolution for many years now, because I love Tropius, but it is so bad. It's got a base stat total of only 460, which is on the lower side for a Pokemon with no evolutions. The stats aren't spread out well either, having good HP but mad defenses, poor attacking power, and bad speed. Additionally, as cool as Grass Flying is as a typing, it's not very good. 5 weaknesses, one of them being a 4x weakness, is pretty rough. Also, all of Tropius's abilities depend on sunlight, so it's really only usable on sun teams, which, as I mentioned with Dreadnought, kinda stinks because weather's not as good as it used to be. Also, its moveset, it's not shallow, but it's certainly not wide. But in the end, Tropius's stats, I think, are the biggest thing holding it back. That's why I wanted to get a regional variant and then regional evolution, because honestly, that's the only way I see it becoming any kind of good. Next up is number 7, Decidueye. Decidueye is my favorite Alola starter and my 3rd favorite Pokemon of Gen 7 behind Vikavolt and Marshadow. It's so well designed, and the archery theme is so cool. I loved using one as my starter in Sun, and I think its shiny is excellent. Unfortunately, it's not as good as I wish it was. It's not bad. I mean, you can't be bad if your base stat total is 530, unless you're slacking. But it's the worst of the 3 Alola starters competitively, which is a shame because it's my favorite of the 3. Decidueye's stat spread is a big reason for its issues. Equal attack and special attack is nice for a playthrough, but not good for competitive, since it means both end up mediocre rather than one being really good. Its speed is too fast to be good under Trick Room, but too slow to be good outside of it. It then lacks the physical bulk to make up for that slowness. Its abilities also are not great. The default starter abilities are never that good, but Decidueye specifically got screwed over in regards to its hidden ability compared to the other 2 Alola starters. Intimidate on Incineroar is incredible because Intimidate is such a good ability, especially in doubles. That's why Incineroar is used so much in VGC. Liquid Voice on Primarina is also pretty solid. It's not incredible, but it allows it to get Stab from Hyper Voice, which is an excellent 2-target move in double battles, again, in VGC. But Decidueye, its signature ability, hidden ability, is Long Reach, which just makes it so it never makes contact with the enemy. Which is like, that is so situational. Combine those issues with bad defensive typing, Grass Ghost has 5 weaknesses, and you've got the worst Alola starter competitively. Like I said, it's good in playthroughs, but I just wish it was the big threat that Incineroar is, because I think it's so freaking cool. Next is number 8, Talonflame. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, let me explain. The biggest reason I fell in love with Talonflame, besides its awesome design, was kicking butt with it in Gen 6. I used a Gale Wings Talonflame to get some big wins at a VGC regional tournament, where I finished 24th out of over 250 competitors. And I used one to get a 50 streak in the Battle Mason Doubles Challenge. Talonflame put in so much work for me in Gen 6. Across the board, Talonflame was incredible in Gen 6. It was widely used both in Smogon's format and in VGC. But then Gen 7 came, and things came crashing down in spectacular fashion. The primary reason Talonflame was so good was because of its ability Gale Wings, which gives +1 priority to all flying type moves. Therefore, it could get guaranteed first move Brave Bird and Acrobatics and do massive damage before the enemy Pokemon could hit it first. But then in Gen 7, I guess the devs thought that was too OP, and they nerfed Gale Wings to only work when Talonflame is at full HP. That sucks. The ability is now useless by comparison. If Talonflame takes any damage at all, whether it's Brave Bird recoil or an entry hazard or a direct attack, then it loses Gale Wings completely. It's as if it doesn't have an ability anymore. And that's terrible because your Pokemon are gonna take damage in Pokemon battles. And its other option is Flame Body, which just is not that good. This threatening offensive force is now just a meh Pokemon in the competitive scene, which is hugely disappointing to me because the reason I fell in love with it was because it was so good. I really wish the Gale Wings nerf never happened and that Talonflame was as good as it was back in Gen 6. Next is number 9, Luxray. I don't think there's a single Pokemon fan out there that doesn't at least somewhat like Luxray. It's badass, has fantastic regular and shiny colorings, and is a staple member of any Sinnoh playthrough team. I've loved it since using it as a kid. But Luxray suffers a lot of the same problems that Zebstrike does. It is a physical electric type Pokemon, and since it doesn't have a signature move, its best stab attack is Wild Charge, which hurts it. And that's bad. The rest of its stats also don't help with its great physical attack. Like is the case with many Pokemon, it's too slow to outspeed threats, but also too frail to live hits from them. It is extremely difficult to succeed with middling speed and below average bulk, no matter how good your attacking stats are. Intimidate and Guts are great abilities, but they don't make up for its bad stats and bad move pool. I'm hoping it'll get something cool in the Sword and Shield DLC to make it better, but I'm not getting my hopes up because Sinnoh remakes are the next remakes scheduled, I think, and I doubt they're gonna give some drastic change to Luxray when Sinnoh's so close. And finally is number 10, Tauros. Tauros is my favorite Kanto Pokemon. I know its design is simple, but I think it was executed really well. Plus, I'm a Texas boy who is a fan of the Houston Texans, so it reminds me of that stuff. Tauros was amazing in Gen 1 because of how critical hits were determined. They were based on the Pokemon's base speed stat, and since Tauros is so fast, it would get a critical hit about 20% of the time. For comparisons, the base crit rate nowadays is just 4%. But since then, it's just not as good anymore. First off, it's a normal type, and it's hard to succeed with no stab super effective hits and no resistances, just one immunity. It does have sheer force, which is amazing, and its move pool is super wide, but its offensive stats are outclassed by many other Pokemon. Its special attack is useless, so forget all of the special coverage, and while base 100 physical attack is solid, it's nothing to write home about, especially not if its role is to be a sweeper type Pokemon. Tauros would benefit from a lot of things, like mainly different typing, which is why I'd love to see it get a regional variant. I think it deserves some love, hasn't really gotten any since Gen 1, and I'd really like to see it come back to being the dominant force that it was all that time ago. Thanks so much for watching, and an extra special thanks to my patrons over on Patreon who are helping support the channel independent of fluctuating YouTube ad revenue. If you want to help support me in the same way, get some cool perks in exchange, like your name here at the end of the video, the link is in the description below. Also, if you want to check out some more of my fun Pokemon content, I recommend these videos here. All right, that's all I have for now, so until next time, big fans. Gotta catch them all.